am live. I've had a bit of a break. Today is the 9th of September. I'm reading The Comedians. There are 3 of them. They met on a cargo ship to Haiti. One of them is Mr. Smith, the presidential candidate. About Mr. Brown's history. I wonder if this is recording. I think it is. Well, I'm here in the second part of the book. Romans 3 is the chapter I'm reading in. And I am continuing because it's a long chapter. You really intend, Dr. Maggio asked me, to take over the hotel? Why not? I have a little experience of restaurant work. I can see great possibilities of improvement. My mother was not catering for the luxury trade. The luxury trade, Dr. Maggio repeated. I think you can hardly depend on that here. Some hotels do. The good years will not always continue. Not very long now, and there will be the elections. It doesn't make much difference, does it, who wins? Not to the poor, but to the tourists, perhaps. He put a flowered saucer on the table beside me. An ashtray would have been out of period in this room, where no one had ever smoked in the old days. He handled the saucer carefully, as though it were of precious porcelain. He was very big and very black, but he possessed great gentleness. He would never ill-treat, I feel sure, even an inanimate object, such as a recalcitrant chair. Nothing can be more inconsiderate to a man of Dr. Maggio's profession than a telephone. But when it rang once during our conversation, he lifted the receiver as gently as he would have raised a patient's wrist. Of the Emperor Christoph. Of course, those days could return very easily, more cruelly perhaps, and certainly more ignobly. God save us from a little Christoph. Nobody could afford to frighten away the American tourists. You need the dollars. When you know us better, you will realize that we don't live on money here, we live on debts. You can always afford to kill a creditor, but no one ever kills a debtor. Whom do you fear? I fear a small country doctor. His name would mean nothing to you now. I only hope you don't see it one day stuck up in electric lights over the city cover. It was mistaken prophecy. He underrated his own stubbornness or his own courage. Otherwise, I would not have been waiting for him later beside the dry swimming pool where the ex-minister lay still as a hunk of beef in a butcher's shop. And Marcel, he asked me, what do you propose to do with Marcel? I haven't decided. Tomorrow I must have a word with him. You know he owns a third of the hotel. You forget I've witnessed the will. It occurred to me that he might be ready to sell his shares. I have no cash, but I could probably borrow from the bank. Dr. Maggio put his great pink palms on the knees of his black formal suit and leant towards me as though he had a secret to convey. He said, I would advise you to do the opposite. Let him buy your shares. Make it easy for him and let him buy them cheap. He is Haitian. He can live on very little. He can survive. But there again Dr. Maggio proved to be a false prophet. He saw the future of his country clearer than the fate of the individuals who composed it. I said with a smile, "Oh no, I've taken a fancy to the Trignon. You'll see, I shall stay and I shall survive." I waited 2 days more before I spoke to Marcel, but in the interval I had a word with the bank manager. The last 2 seasons in Port-au-Prince had been good ones. I outlined my plans for the hotel, and the manager, who was a European, made no difficulty in advancing me the money I needed. The only point on which he proved difficult was the rate of repayment. "You are virtually asking me to repay in 3 years?" "Yes. Why?" "Well, you see, before that there are the elections." I had hardly seen Marcel since the funeral. Joseph, the barman, came to me for orders. The cook and the gardener came to me. Marcel had abdicated without a fight. But I noticed when I passed him on the stairs that he smelt strongly of rum. So I had a glass of it ready for him when we came together at last to talk. He listened without a word, and he accepted what I had to say without dispute. What I offered him was a lot of money in Haitian terms. What I offered him, and I offered it in dollars, not gourds, even though it represented half the nominal value of his shares. For psychological effect, I had the money on me in $100 bills. "You had better count them," I told him, but he put the money in his pocket without checking it. "And now," I said, "if you will sign here," and he signed without reading what he signed. It was as easy as that, no scene at all. "I'll need your room," I said, "from tomorrow." Was I harsh to him? What partly influenced me was the embarrassment of dealing with my mother's lover. And it must have been awkward for him too, to meet her son, a man much older than himself. Just before he left the room, he spoke of her. "I pretended not to hear the bell," he said, "but she rang again and again. I thought she might need something. But she only needed you." He said, "I am ashamed." I could hardly have discussed with him the powerful influence of my mother's sexual desires. I said, "You haven't finished your rum." He drained the glass. He said, "When she was angry with me, or when she loved me, she called me, 'You big black beast.' That is what I felt now, a big black beast." He went out of the room, one buttock heavily swollen with $100 bills. And an hour later I watched him, going down the drive, carrying an old cardboard suitcase. He had abandoned in his room the scarlet silk pyjamas with the monogram YM. For a week after that I heard nothing from him. I was very busy at the hotel. The only one who really knew his job was Joseph. I made him famous later for his rum punches. And I could only suppose that our guests were so used to eating badly at home, they accepted the cook's dishes as just an inseparable feature of human life. He served overcooked steaks and ice cream. I found myself living almost entirely on the grapefruit which he found it hard to spoil. The season was nearly at an end, and I longed for the last guest to go, so that I could give the cook his quitus. Not that I knew where to find his successor. Good cooks were not easy to find in Port-au-Prince. One night I felt a strong need to forget the hotel, so I took myself to the casino. In those days, before Dr. Duvalier came to power, there were enough tourists to keep 3 roulette tables busy. You could hear the music from the nightclub below, and occasionally a woman in evening dress, tired of dancing, would bring her partner to the tables. Haitian women are the most beautiful in the world, I think, and there were faces and figures there which would have made a fortune for their owners in a Western capital. And always for me in the casino was the sense that anything might happen. Man has but one virginity to lose, and I had lost mine that winter afternoon in Monte Carlo. been playing for several minutes before I saw that Marcel was sitting at the same table. I would have shifted, but I had already won once en plein. I have a superstition that only a single table each night is lucky, and tonight I had found my lucky table, for in 20 minutes I was already $150 to the good. I caught the eye of a young European woman across the table. She smiled and began to follow my stakes, saying a word to her companion, a fat man with an enormous cigar, who fed her with tokens and never played himself. But the table, which was so lucky for me, was unlucky for Marcel. Sometimes we placed our stakes on the same square, and then I lost. I began to wait until he had laid his tokens before I placed my bet, and the girl who saw what I was at followed suit. It was as though we were dancing in step, as in a Malayan ron-ron, without touching. I was content because she was pretty and because I remembered Monte Carlo. As for the fat man, I could deal with that trouble later. Perhaps he too belonged to the Banque de l'Indochine. Marcel was following a mad system. It was as though he were bored with the game, and the quicker he lost, the quicker he could leave the table. Then he saw me, and shoveling together the remainder of his tokens, he laid them all on zero, which had not come up for more than 30 turns. He lost, of course, as one always loses with a desperate throw, and he pushed back his chair. I leant across to him with a $10 token. Have a bit of my luck, I said. Was I trying to humiliate him, to remind him that he had been my mother's paid lover? I don't remember now. But it was that was my motive. I certainly failed. He took the token and replied with a great courtesy in his careful French. Tout ce que fait eu de chance dans ma vie m'est venu de votre famille. He bet again on zero, and zero came up. I hadn't followed him. He returned me my token and said, "Excuse me, I must go away now. I have a great need to sleep." I watched him leave the salle. He had over $300 to change now. He was off my conscience, and though he was certainly very black and very big, it was unfair, I thought, to have called him, as my mother had done, a beast. Somehow all the seriousness was drained out of the salon when he left. We were all small-timers now, playing for fun, risking nothing and gaining nothing but the price of a few drinks. I raised my winnings to $350 and dropped them to $200, only for the pleasure of seeing the man with a cigar lose a little too. Then I stopped. Exchanging my tokens, I asked the cashier who the girl was. "Madame Pineda," he said, "a German lady." "I don't like Germans," I said with disappointment. "Nor do I." "Who's the fat man?" "Her husband, the ambassador." He named some small South American state, but I forgot it the next moment. I used to be able to distinguish one South American republic from another by the postage stamps, but I had left my collection behind at the College of the Visitations as a gift to the boy whom I considered my greatest friend. I have long forgotten his name. "I don't like ambassadors much either," I told the cashier. "They are a necessary evil," he replied, counting out my dollar notes. "You believe that evil is necessary? Then you are a Manichean, like myself." Our theological discussion could go no further, for he had not been educated at the College of the Visitation. And in any case, the girl's voice interrupted us. "Husbands too." "What about husbands?" "A necessary evil," she said, putting down her tokens on the cashier's desk. and I have no idea when this finished. So I finish this here now and continue this chapter, Romans 3,